Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 492. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, special Friday night edition of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Just schedules, whatever. We're here this week. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show, podcast, etc. Talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line, if it concerns the sweet science, it will um, get discussed. If you want to find Pound for Pound Boxing Report all over the social media sphere, just check the description. If you're checking us out on YouTube, you'll see links to the YouTube channel, links to the Twitter page and the Facebook page, and as well. If you wish to email us, you can do so. P4P Boxing at p4pboxingreport.com. Also, if you check the description, you will see that Pound for Pound Box Report kind of has some affiliates. If you are in the fragrance, cologne, perfume space, uh, uh, Pound for Pound Box Report, and I'll put it here for everybody to see. Um, if you use the code Michael WP4P, you will get 15% off on all fragrances from the House of Navarrete fragrances as well as Nazar fragrances. And if you use the code MIKE15, you'll get 15% off on all purchases uh, from Harmony Parfumes. That is Harmony spelled with an X, pronounced with an H. I see Daniel has joined us. Daniel from Fort Boxing News and the Inscriber. Also, if you check the description for those who are watching on YouTube, we got donation links. Let donation be the best nation. Um, Cash Me PayPal version, whether it's $1, whether it's $2, whether it's $5, whatever you want to contribute. It'll be greatly beneficial to us, particularly behind the scenes from the production standpoint. Let's get things going. Not a lot of fights to talk about from this past week. I'm going to try to, but the main card was kind of, how can I put it? Um, a reentry, if you will, boxing back on broadcast cable for those in the United States, as on TNT in collaboration with DAZN. Abdullah Mason uh, made the first defense of the WBO lightweight strap Gale against Albert Bell. Original opponent George Cordina um, was had to withdraw due to some legal issues in his home country of England, right? So heading into this fight, a lot of people didn't think a lot about Bell, but once the bell rung, Gail, different scenario as Albert Bell, I would argue, outboxed Mason, right? Uses height, uses reach and whatnot to create distance, do an effective job of jabbing and counter punching Mason. Mason has some frustrations trying to figure him out. Midpoint, I would say, he began to figure things out, was more aggressive, focused on the body. Heading into the last round, close fight, Mason put Bell down early in the round. The fight was ultimately stopped. The reason I call it bogus stoppage, Gail, because um, it seemed to me, and I want your opinion on this as well as Daniel, that as soon as Bell got hurt and went down, the referee found an easy out, an easy way to call a stoppage. Uh, it seemed like that he was looking for a way to ensure that Mason would make a silent agreement that Mason was going to win. And the first sign that he could, uh, uh, first sign of that, he did that. I thought this stoppage was ridiculous. Was Bell a bit buzzed? Yeah, but did he deserve the right to carry on? Absolutely, and that's my biggest problem with the way this fight ended. Along with the fact, especially when you include how well Albert Bell did for 2/3 of that bout, a strong argument can be made that he was winning that fight heading into the last round.
Well, as it turned out, he was nowhere close to winning the fight into that last round, given the scorecards we looked at later. I'm going to present a little bit different lens on this. Clearly, Bell had very strong performance the first half of the fight. If you looked at various experts, observers who know what they're looking at, we were commenting on boxing Twitter. People had him up anywhere from three, it was either even at worst. Most people had it either 4-2 or 5-1. I want to stop and give enormous credit to Valiant Mason, Abdullah's father and trainer, who after the sixth round, or either after the fifth or sixth round, he and the Mason brothers, Team Mason, who was in the corner, told Abdullah in a polite way, "You're blowing it, son. You need to step it up. You're losing rounds." And Abdullah seemed a little surprised by that, but what a sign of maturity in a kid who's 22 years old to listen, absorb it, not push back, but say, "Okay, I gotcha," and take care of his business, which is exactly what he did. That is a mature performance from a young man. He stepped on the gas. He got much busier. He did start hurting Bell because he started to focus on a body attack, which was the recommendation from Valiant. And he delivered on it. He started taking the wind out of Bell's sails. Bell is quite a few years older than Abdullah is. That could have had something to do with it as well. But what it turned out that most people didn't know until you listened to him in the post-fight interview is right somewhere early in that middle round section when Abdullah really started to step it up. If you noticed Bell's nose bleeding, he had a broken nose. Now let's give him enormous credit for carrying on, soldiering on for 5 more rounds with fighting with a broken nose. But he made it clear he couldn't breathe. No wonder he was slowing down a little bit. So he gets knocked down, legit knockdown, gets up, takes the count. Mason knows, okay, I got him in trouble. Let's make sure the scorecards don't matter, especially if I'm behind. And he swarmed him, knocked him down again. Now, Mark Nelson is standing right there. They're smelling each other's breath, right? He has got his face right in Bell's face. Do I think that Mark Nelson should have given Bell the count? Yes, I do. I think, especially in a championship fight with a guy who's undefeated, who's not a youngster, this isn't a 4-round fight, or at the opposite end, somebody at the end of their career who's taken a lot of damage. That's where you start thinking about stopping a fight quickly to save a youngster or to prevent more damage to a veteran. Well, Bell didn't fall in either of those categories. So everyone else, especially in a high-level fight, deserves the dignity of a count, if nothing else. Now, I think even if Nelson had let Bell stand up and given him a count, if Nelson, because he's sitting there observing, can see that Bell has got some distress from that broken nose, or I believe there was still, another minute left in the round, he decided, I'm going to stop this. The end is inevitable. I do not think for a second that if Nelson had let Bell get up, take the count, and then let Mason storm him one more time, that the outcome would have been any different. Nevertheless, would I preferred him to get a count? Yes. I get it that Bell, as someone with an undefeated record in a championship fight, no fighter wants a knockout on their record. If they're going to take the L, okay, they're going to take the L. But they would rather have a decision loss than a knockout loss. So that's part of what's driving Bell. I get it. And he's also a grown-ass man. He knows what he's doing. He's not a kid who needs to be protected. So I really understand why Bell was mad about it, was disappointed. But he was injured. That was a legitimate injury. The fight was going to be stopped. So I'm not possessing the same sense of outrage that was expressed by a lot of people after that fight. I get it. But the referee, let's remember, the referee, for all we get frustrated about some of the things referees do from time to time, my good pal and now retired referee turned judge, Pat Russell, said to me one time, this is the way I think about my job. I am the only friend that fighter has in the ring. I'm it. Not his manager, not his corner, not the broadcasters, not the fans, me. That's it. And he acts in the ring accordingly because he's the one guy worried about the health and fitness of that fighter. And he's he has said several times in my presence, I'll take the heat for an early stoppage, but better I stop a fight one round too early than one round too late.
To Gail's credit, Daniel, Mason must be applauded uh, um, for his patience, for his maturity, and rising to the moment, if that makes sense. When he was told, in effect, that he needs to step it up and put the foot on the gas, he did that over the second half of the fight. And there was a reason that Bell was in such distress in the end, even though I thought he should have been given afforded the ability to carry on. That was because of what Mason was doing and the punishment that he was inflicting. Quick word on that, and coming off of this kind of fight, this kind of performance for Mason, where do you see him going? Now, when we talked about it last week, I kind of hinted that if he won, which he did, that they should maybe try to go back and try to make a fight with Joe Cordina, the original opponent, right? You had Floyd Schofield running his mouth a whole lot. Now, part of me is like, okay, you saying this and that and all that. One, you hadn't really fought anybody yet, but two, Mason, get in there and see what this dude is about. But that's just my own personal take. Your assessment, and where does the champ go from here?
This was an interesting fight because we'll admit it, last week we didn't give Bell much of a chance when it came to the game plan, when it came to the presentation, when it came to their circumstances, the fight. But he came in with a pretty decent game plan for the first half of the fight. And you could tell it frustrated Mason for a little bit. And maybe that's a good thing that his corner did tell him, hey, you're kind of losing the fight. Because if the corner is telling you, and luckily this is, I agree with you, a sign of great maturity, Mason's is able to look at it and say, like, okay, all right, my corner's telling me that I need to fix something, I need to step on the gas. It would be something I would love to see in his next fight, which I personally, I do believe it should be against Cordina. Like, it wasn't his fault. Again, it wasn't his fault as much. Like, it wasn't like an issue, an injury, or controversy. It's unfortunately, it's just outside of Cordina's control, and he should be given a chance to earn this fight. Because one good thing about this fight, the way it turned out, even with the scorecards being as wide as it became, is the fact that it showed that you can test Mason. It shows that you can test him as far as how he's going to handle adversity and how he's going to handle new tactics or things that you don't expect other challengers to do. And Joe Cordina will probably present something similar. So that's definitely what I think it should be next. But great fight by Mason. Was able to adjust what he needed to adjust. He was able to listen to his corner. He didn't brush them off. And he did finish the fight. Well, like I said, I agree that Bell should have gotten at least you could say the dignity of finishing the fight because the stoppage was so late. At the same time, then that adds a feather in your cap, saying like, okay, I can break somebody down to the point where even if you think you got to finish it, I was able to break them down. And now that we know, like I said, what happened with Bell and his injury, that actually the decision looks better in hindsight.
On the undercard, I'm going back to you, Daniel. Bruce Carrington, Shushu Carrington, made first defense of his the WBC belt at 126 against Rene Palacios. Carrington won, but he left a lot to be desired with his overall performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
When talking about Shushu, maybe 6 months, a year ago, he looked spectacular in there. But in his last couple of outings, I think you're getting a case of okay, is one thing to look how you perform against fighters who are below your level in terms of competition, but as he's stepped up in the level in fighting world class uh, um, competition, there are some flaws, right? Carrington makes a lot of talking about a fight against Inoue once Monster Inoue eventually moves up to 126 next year. My thing is, okay, that's one thing, but you need to start worrying about what's available and what's lies in front of you right now at featherweight. There's talk of him maybe going for a unification bout later on this year. And I'm like, all right, could he beat Brandon Figueroa? Yeah. Could he beat Angelo Leo? Yeah. But if they're really serious about talking about uh, Carrington fighting a Rafael Espinoza, who's WBO champion at 126. Wait a minute now, because the Shushu that we saw when he won the title late last year, and the Shushu that we saw, especially against in this fight, no, 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 no. Espinosa is a whole different beast. And don't think that Espinosa didn't see the way that Shushu got hurt with one of Gail's favorite punches, body shot in round 11.
This fight, you can pretty much say, is the opposite of the main event. Like, obviously, in the main event, you had the challenger come out really good in the beginning, the start, and then the champion assert himself later on. You had the inverse on this. Shusha Carrington was handling Palacios pretty well early on in the fight. But this is where the part where the maturity comes in, because Palacios was able to weather that and slowly build momentum, slowly land better shots, slowly find the cracks in Carrington's defense. And I know there is that controversy of that knockdown. Now, you can, when you see it, it kind of looks like it might have come from a rabbit punch in a way. So the way the referee had the right discretion not calling it a knockdown, but at the same time, you could tell Carrington was kind of hurt from that. So in this fight, I would definitely take this when it comes to Shushu's team. Okay, I do need to work on a few things. I do need to work on trying to establish my rhythm throughout the entire fight, not allow your opponent to really effectively establish himself in the second half of the fight, especially after the way you dominated the first half. Because Espinoza, if you do unification with Espinoza, that's a tough hill to climb. And I'm honestly looking at that fight, I would probably say he would have a tough time beating Brandon Figueroa. Because Brandon Figueroa will try to bring it from the beginning. Leo is probably a little bit better shot, but they do really need to work on not letting their opponents dictate the second half of the fight. And like I said, they get lucky with that knockdown not become a knockdown, because then that changes the narrative for the whole fight in a way.
for me, Gail, it's the fact that he fought at one speed. There were opportunities where he could have, like Mason in the main event, put the foot on the gas. He didn't. He kind of got complacent. I wonder if he like mentally either settled or checked out a bit, and he almost paid for it when he got hurt. If you're talking about fighting the best in this division, and talking about in a way, uh, you have to be better. To Daniel's point, improvements must be made, and I think you agree with me on this. Um, put him in the ring with Espinosa right now. I think that Espinosa beats him.
Oh, I think there's no doubt. I think Espinoza would go through him like a buzzsaw.
Yes,
I think it would be ugly. And I
because
don't think
that dude, that tall drink of water from Mexico is an offensive machine who can punch
I have seen
like the
him
Dickens.
fight now 3 times, and it is impressive. Let me tell you, it is. Watching him on TV, there's no comparison. Go see him in person if you ever have an opportunity. Here's the thing. I think Bruce Carrington is such a good dude. He's a good human being. He's come from a very rough background. He's scraped to get where he is legitimately. A lot of boxers come from a non-affluent background, but he definitely did what it took to rise. He's great on the mic. He's good to deal with. He's not a problem child. He's not a whiner. He's not a diva. He's a wonderful self-promoter. He's got a good sense of humor about him. And he's a decent, fine boxer. I think that he has done absolutely everything he can with his skills. What I fear about Bruce Carrington is that he's plateaued. That this is it. He's gotten
Do you
himself on raw talent, developed with his work ethic. I think he's plateaued. What's it going to take for him to break through? Is it
excuse me for interrupting? Do you think that him having to continue to come down to 126 plays a role in that?
no?
He may become a physical stale.
No, no, I don't think that has anything to do with it. He's not a big guy. If you've ever stand next to him, he's not a big 126. And look at him standing next to somebody like Espinoza or somebody like Brandon Figueroa, who's a pretty big featherweight. I think Bruce needs to find a new approach to training, a new game plan. I don't always say changing a trainer is what's necessary, but it is a very smart thing to do. And a lot of veteran trainers with a long-term relationship with their athlete brings in other trainers. Smart trainers do that. Virgil Ortiz Sr. brought in Robert Garcia when he reached the limit of his ability to train his son. Smart thing to do. And Virgil Sr. has a bit of an ego, so I'm sure that was very hard for him to do, but he did it. So that's what Bruce needs to do, or otherwise we're pretty much going to see what we saw last week. If he doesn't, the best cash out fight he could possibly get is against Inoue. And the best possible entry to the division for Inoue is Bruce Carrington. He'll make a good promotion. They'll be easy to deal with. Bruce will get a big payday. Inoue gets a fight that absolutely guarantees him getting a belt at featherweight. Honestly, it's a great deal all the way around, except for, that little teeny little detail that Bruce would take the L. But if he is very honest with himself and his team is very honest, that he looks around at the other 3 belt holders, trying to figure out, who do I go after? Who do I have a shot against? None of them are particularly big money fights, but Inoue would be. I'm just saying.
Cash out opportunity at 126. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll get
And
paid,
he'd
but
get
he'll get knocked
paid.
out. He'll get knocked out by Anu if they fight right now.
Yeah, he would. He'd get stopped. He'd get paid. And one loss isn't fatal at this stage. It wouldn't be. I think Bruce has a lot of upside in other areas of boxing besides being in the ring. He reminds me a little bit of his skill set, his talents, his appeal. Reminds me a lot of Chris Algieri. Chris stayed in the ring too damn long. He got the crap kicked out of him in the last few fights he was in, and he admits it. He absolutely admits it. Chris has made an absolutely phenomenal career for himself out of the ring. I could see Carrington going down that road, absolutely. But that's a tough call when you have fought and scraped and put the time and sweat equity in to get where you are and you're a world champion. Yeah, it's a tough call. But with enough money dangled in front of you to bet on yourself, even if you think it's going to be a very, very steep hill to climb, I truly think that's exactly why he's so vocal about calling out Inouye.
We'll see where he goes from here, Miss. We'll see if it's really true that he intends to go for unification by the end of the year with let's just say the WBO champ, because I say right now that dude is a 2026 version of Alexis Arguello, as far as I'm concerned, and be a really good fight. A really good fight, but I think Espinoza will be too much for Carrington right now. I still hope it'll happen though. Let's move to some news here. And going back to you, Gail, the worst kept secret in boxing. Shakur Stevenson made it official in Zuffa, the official quote unquote signing. We knew about this over a month ago when Eddie Hearns spilled the tea, as they say nowadays. Here's my question. Stevenson believes that he's going to get the big fights over there, and he believes there's going to be a domino effect in other fighters going over to Zuffa. But given the current model of Zuffa Boxing, is it fair to have questions about this move? Given I think things were going pretty good for him right now, before with Top Rank and then with Eddie Hearn. Is the reward, particularly the financial reward that I'm guessing he's getting in the immediate, is that going to be beneficial long term in terms of his overall career and legacy?
Yeah, well, there is a recent interview, a very enlightening interview that dropped with Shakur, courtesy of Dan Rayfield's podcast. I strongly recommend everybody check that out. Learn a lot listening to Shakur. I will say up front, before I get to the content, I was very impressed with how Shakur handled himself in that interview. He's come a long way. Shakur made it very clear that he is getting life-changing money. He's pretty much saying, I'm going to make a shit ton of money. I want the biggest fights, but I'm going to be paid a shit ton of money no matter who I'm fighting. I mean, he was very blunt about it. He also, however, said, absolutely no way he's fighting Raul Valenzuela. So that theory, folks, that got shut down by Shakur pretty strongly. There is also a lot of industry chatter about how Shakur has had a bit of a falling out with Eddie Hearn. Now, if that's on the up and up, I will give them credit for not airing their dirty laundry in public, at least not to this point. But that part of the motivation for him signing with Dana is to stick it to Eddie. Because as we all know, Eddie and Dana are mortal enemies at this point. So there's that.
That's being polite, Gail.
They're in a world-class pissing contest right now. And I'm here for it, actually, but we all watched it go on. So there's that. Shakur says he wants the biggest fights. I absolutely do believe him. We're all sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop with Zuffa and Conor Benn as to whether he fights Ryan Garcia. Well, if they're able to make a deal somehow with Ryan, what that tells me is whatever happens with Ryan and Conor, you could stage a a rematch between Ryan, pardon me, not a rematch, but you could stage a fight between Ryan and Shakur. But Shakur was also, he didn't come straight out and say it. The name passed his mouth, running down a whole bunch of people. My thinking is that this entire deal is set up to entice Tank Davis into the ring with Shakur. Maybe it's a one fight, one off. They are somewhat rolling the dice because we don't know what Tank's status is. Is he, he's dropped off the radar. He has enormous legal trouble in front of him. Is he going to be in prison? Is he going to be working his way through the criminal justice system, which can be incredibly slow? We don't know. And he certainly, he's not a reliable dance partner. But if they could keep Shakur busy enough to try to wait that possibility out, I mean, the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow is massive. It's massive. So they may be tap dancing a while. Now, Shakur says he plans to fight once more this calendar year. So they only have to put one fight together for him. One. With enough money, anything is possible. Virtually anybody, 140 would be willing to step in with him for a big enough check. We'll see. Right now, everything is talk. We've no reason to disbelieve anybody, but let's see what happens. This is a big, big deal signing. If Zuffa and Dana White can't make the enormous promise pay off for the amount they're investing, the truth is they've gotten a pretty big bang for the buck signing Shakur from a marketing and a publicity perspective, even if he never steps in the ring after this. They were brilliant to do it on a slow news week, although, a lot of stuff ended up piling up in a week. There's not a whole lot of fight activity going on. But any news that dropped this week got a huge spotlight on it because there ain't shit else going on. So my take on this is Zuffa, if it's strictly a look who we got, the biggest name in American boxing is now, in our camp. They got their money's worth, whether Shakur ever fights for him or not, from the marketing and publicity perspective. It was an absolutely tremendous investment. But I think they're going to struggle to find quality opposition for him. I do.
I mean, it's the equivalent of a big political story dropping on a Friday night in boxing context.
No, that's not. I'm going to push back because the big political stories that drop on Friday drop to be hidden because they're so negative. That's not this. This is a hugely positive story. And Zuffa and Dana placed it here because what's the biggest combat sports story of the weekend? Conor McGregor. So all eyes are on Dana. All eyes are on Dana. What do you think he's going to talk about tomorrow during that card? Don't you think Shakur's name's going to come up with tens of millions of people watching that friggin' card? You bet they will. You better believe it. That's a huge marketing get. It's huge. Can they fulfill the promise? I think Shakur would be wildly disappointed if they can't. But you know what? Shakur's road to the Hall of Fame is secured. If he isn't a first ballot inductee once he finally decides to retire, I'll be shocked, honestly. So what does he need now at this point of his career? Would he like to get some big fights and add to that legacy? Of course he would. Of course he would. Wouldn't any athlete? But if you're struggling to get those fights anyway, and you could get handsomely paid either way, Why wouldn't you? It's exactly the same reason that Alexander Usyk's going to sign with them to do a one-fight deal with Deontay Wilder. I'm telling you right now, they are going to make their exit from boxing pay off. I do not, I do not throw shade on either of them for doing that. It's called prize fighting. They work long and hard. If they want to guarantee themselves a cash out, no matter what else happens in this crazy world of boxing, you know what? Bless them both. It's a smart move.
I mean, look, Daniel, if he probably saw Conor Ben get that basically $15 million one fight contract when he bolted and left Eddie Hearn, and he figured, okay, if that kind of money is out there, I'm a much better fighter than Conor. I might get some of that gold as well.
Yeah, sadly from an economic standpoint for Shakur, it makes sense. It makes sense if he's gonna try to make as much as he can, and he does seem like one of the fighters that is not gonna try to stay around too long for, like I said, for health purposes and make sure that, like I said, he doesn't overstay his welcome. And Gail's right in the sense of the fact that all eyes are unfortunately are on watching the ghost of Conor McGregor or Max Holloway to in UFC. And to me, to say the ghost of Conor McGregor is probably being too kind. It is probably the metaphorical dust of one Mr. Conor McGregor. But with that being said, yeah, it is a big coup. It is a very, very big coup for Dana White. And it's just adding a little bit feather to the cap. And if he adds to the bonus of maybe metaphorically shanking Eddie Hearn a little bit, to him, it's all worth it. Now, the tough part is trying to find an actual opponent that's going to take a good long while that isn't already been tied to Zuffa. They're going to test it, though, because you mentioned Conor Ben. It looks like Conor Ben and Ryan Garcia are going to hash out their differences as far as promotions are concerned.
I mean, they better hurry it up. They talking September, and it's what, early July?
Yeah.
They better get that finalized.
Yep. And remember, Ryan, for all intents and purposes, at least legally, from my understanding, is still a Golden Boy fighter.
He is.
So this is going to be the first major case in this landscape of having a Zuffa fighter versus a fighter that lives in the actual boxing world. But that's you hear there. This many about Shakur. We'll see what he does in that area. Most people have been trying to get him to do Devin Haney. I would not be against it. I think Shakur would probably win that fight. But whoever they pick, he's gonna get paid. And that is probably the biggest key of all. He's gonna get paid, he's gonna get generational wealth. And he understands, like, I'm not gonna try to be a fighter for the rest of my life or stay too long where my record doesn't look the way I want it to look. So, hey, big ups to Shakur. And I have to begrudgingly say it. I tip my cap in this way to Dana White. Nicely done.
Let's move on to some other news here. And I'm going to split these up. Going back to you, Gail, it was announced this week Roland Romero is going to finally return to the ring to face Teofimo Lopez. That's what's going to happen in August 22nd, I believe, is the exact date in Vegas. I'm glad that Rolly is finally getting back to work, but I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, coming off of the loss to Shakur earlier this year, this is an old golden opportunity for Teofimo Lopez, because if skill means anything, athleticism, speed, he is the better fighter.
I think it's going to be a lot closer fight than people think. Teofimo, he runs so hot and cold.
Can't trust him.
You can't trust him. He's got his crazy ass father training him, and
Oh God, let's
we
not.
just
Let's
talked about
not with his.
father doing
Let's
that.
not with his comments that he said earlier today about Lord.
Well, I'm going to harken back to something he said at the news conference, which really stuck with me, because I think that he, it's like the blind squirrel finding a nut. It was a nugget of truth that at least he seems to recognize that with his son, it is not about Styles making fights. It is not about training camp. That with his son, it is all mental. All mental. If Junior's head is right, he performs well. If it's
How about Senior
not,
just step out of the plate? He's not a good trainer. I don't care what anybody says.
you know what? Well, his son could easily fire him. His son is the one keeping his father there. That's his security blanket. I think he is fearful of working with other trainers because he might need to face some truth about
Accountability. I
improve
think
what
that's
he
the word
needs
you're
to
looking
work
for.
on. No, I'm not looking for that word, actually. I think it's facing the reality about yourself. Um, I I don't think that Lopez Jr. lacks work ethic. I think he lacks direction. Let's all recall in that horrific performance against Shakur earlier this year, January, which we've all probably already forgotten. I mean, lost 11 rounds to 1, and he only got 1 round because I think he got a mercy round.
Yeah.
But his father's directions were worse than useless. He would
Where
have done
is your power, bro?
he would have done
What?
a
Oh my
better
gosh.
job on Lopez Jr.'s behalf if he'd said nothing.
And thank you.
He distracted him. He rattled his cage. He's right when he says when Teofimo's head isn't right, he doesn't perform. Well, he needs to look in the mirror to contributing to that. But no, they are Siamese twins. They are never going to be separated. That's the way it goes. Having said that, this is a good matchup for him, and that Rolly will come forward, will come at him. He has trouble with slick, skills-based fighters. We've all seen it. He should have lost to Jermaine Ortiz. He should have lost to Sandor Martin. So he's got somebody who will engage, and they've sparred with each other many times, and they're friends. They're friends. At the news conference, Raleigh was sort of his usual chill self, and Teo pulled, a handful of shenanigans. The only one who raised his voice at all was, of course, Senior, who decided he was going to flame Raleigh a little bit. I give Raleigh a whole lot of credit. First of all, he left the fur coat at home this time. He was in Las Vegas, and I know for a fact it was like 112 degrees yesterday. So no fur coat appeared. And I take that back. They were in Hollywood. It was still hot enough, trust me. And he was very chill about it. I mean, he just let all of Senior's nonsense roll right off his back. He did not give a damn what Senior. I mean, basically laughed at him. And under his breath while Senior was talking.
Question, if you will, Rolly outside the ring. I think the underrated inside the ring, the underrated aspect of Rolly, he is more intelligent and more wise than people give him credit for outside of the ring.
I couldn't agree with you more. And by the way, he does a wicked impersonation of Teofimo Sr. Which is quite funny. I like this fight. I don't hate it at all. There's a belt involved. You'll see what happens.
We will see again. These two cats are fighting in August in Las Vegas for Rollies. Go ahead.
Not a pay-per-view, ladies and gentlemen. Not a pay-per-view. It's a DAZN fight, but no one is going to soak you $79.95 for this fight.
Exactly, and that's always a plus.
Technically, it is the first fight under the new DAZN PBC deal.
And we will talk about that shortly. Daniel, another news bit. Last we saw Oshaki Foster, he was taking care of business against Ray Ford. Last we saw Emanuel Navarrete, he was dominant in a win over Nunez to become unified champion, right? Word is coming out now that the two are in early talks for a unification bout to take place if everything is finalized and if a deal can be made. They will fight later on this year. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Two fighters at the top of the game, trying to come together, trying to fight fighting the best to see who is top dog in the division. This should be applauded that they're even in discussions. Now, if the fight happens, even more so. I love it.
Oh, no. Everyone should love it because it is a matchup that people have wanted to see. Because it's O'Shaquie Foster's calculated, methodical, but yet pretty actually exciting for what you see style versus Navarrete, who is still fighting in the vaquero straight come forward style. And we have to see now if the Navarrete that we saw in this last fight will still be the same one that she faces against Foster. Because Foster, he thrives on being overlooked. And this is the fight where I could definitely see him being overlooked because Navarrete has higher name value and a more aesthetically pleasing style. But like I said, that's the environment O'Shaquie Foster tends to thrive in. So this is definitely a great fight to have. We need to see how soon it lands, though. We need to see that landing spot.
Well, I think a bonus here is that Foster has shown that he's been willing to fight in Mexico. He defended his title. He defended the title in Mexico. Very exciting win last round. Stoppage winner with mandatory contender. I forgot the name at the present time. I'll remember it later. But I think if they offer enough money, particularly if Turkey Al-Sheikh is behind it and throwing a lot of coin, that they could convince Foster to do the same, go to Mexico and fight, or they could fight in a place like Phoenix, Glendale in Arizona, Las Vegas, somewhere in Southern California, just in the West Coast, general Southwest region. Or maybe if the money's right, they can convince Vaquero to fight Foster somewhere in the state of Texas, which is Foster's home state. The bottom line is the fact that they are talking, and let's hope, fingers crossed, that this fight gets made. You kind of hinted at this story in our discussion about Shakur, Gail, and that is PBC and DAZN have announced an agreement. Talk about that and talk about you. We also mentioned Tank Davis, and it's kind of a question mark of where Tank Davis fits into all of this. Explain, please.
Well, DAZN has convinced most of the major promoters, has gone on a little bit of a buying spree, to come under their one umbrella together to combat the long-held argument, about promoters having firewalls between them, not only because of fighters in different promoter camps, but fighters across different broadcast and streaming platforms, which really has been the bigger barrier for a lot of the fights. We've got that argument going on right now with Ryan Garcia, right? And Anthony Joshua, for that matter. Their contracts stipulate that their fights must take place on DAZN. You've got people on the other side of the aisle saying, no, we're going to take it to Netflix. We're going to take it to Zuffa. What's going to happen? So the last major piece of the puzzle was PBC. What's quietly happened without as much fanfare is the addition of, it's only been, believe it or not, a handful of years that Matchroom has been under the DAZN banner. Queensberry's been with them for some time. You have Golden Boy, you have Boxer, you have Salida Promotions, you have the new professional, legitimate boxing arm of Misfits, which is called MF Pro. Well, and now they've added the other key partner in PBC. This wouldn't have been nearly as attractive if Showtime was still around, or if Paramount Plus had decided to hang on to PBC when it absorbed Showtime, but it didn't. So PBC needed a deal like this. Frankly, it was one of the few places they could go. They were limping along, placing their fighters since the loss of showtime on other cards. They did have a deal for their pay-per-view cards with Prime Video, and it remains to be seen how they're going to handle that end of things. But it was a smart move all the way around for everybody, and it is everybody fortifying, manning the battlements, putting up the wall, against the invaders known as Zuffa, right? It is all the little tiny little kingdoms banding together to fight that one enemy coming at them, right? We'll see how it works, but that's exactly what it's about, is putting everybody on that one platform, working together, trying to hold off whatever it is we see coming with Zuffa and with Paramount Plus. And the truth is, we don't really know. But it was a smart move on all their parts. Again, it's a week with not a lot going on, so they chose to make the announcement this week. Got a huge amount of attention because of that, void and other things to cover, and they were smart to roll it out during the Rolly Teofimo news conference. So we'll see how it all goes down. There are critics who don't like seeing everybody under one banner. I'm not one of them. I think it's a wise idea, strength in numbers.
Given context is critical, and because if this was 10, 20, 30 years ago, I would be against it as well. But given the hovering specter of one Dana White basically trying to step in and force his way in and trying to take over the sport in his own little way, I can understand why the other promoters, networks, other entities in boxing was like, we're going to not let this fly, not under our watch, given White's reputation, good or bad, however you want to see it. To your point, Gail, strength in numbers, and this is something that they have to do. They have to do for their sake and to preserve everything that they're trying to do right now. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I have no pushback against what you're saying.
Yeah, I do want to add, though, something, Mike. I do want to add something about this when it comes to DAZN. This actually now, having pretty much all of the, what you can consider now at this stage, the traditional powers in boxing under their broadcast umbrella, it does make their pricing tier a little bit more enticing, because yes, one of the bad things is like doing the pay-per-views, the $80 pay-per-views. But DAZN does offer it's when you do subscription, if you do their premium for $45 a month, you technically get all their pay-per-views for free. So that may be something that's more enticing in that manner than having everybody now under this umbrella. Makes it a little bit more enticing on that end. So it's a smart move. It is a smart move by DAZN in that sense. And yeah, as much as we would love to have different promoters have different deals, money, that matter, the fact of the matter is this is the battlefield that we're looking at.
And as an aside, as we saw last week with the Mason Bell Carrington Palacios card, it's also smart of them to do a deal with cable television, something that I've been talking about that this sport needs to get back to for a number of years. They have to put the right fights on it and the right promotion into it, serious promotion into it. But yeah, that's a bonus as well.
It is. Now, that folks, if you, like I said, if you haven't paid attention to it, it is on the TNT side, it is called The Fight. They're going to have this once a month. Obviously, this time around, it had to be the Top Rank card. It was the Top Rank's debut on DAZN. But that dynamic that you're seeing with that broadcasting, they had Bud Crawford, they had Tim Bradley, they had Sean Porter. And they had a pretty decent chemistry. And when it came to how they were discussing and analyzing the fight, and it actually works out fairly well for them if they do this like once a month, and then you see them working maybe a Salida card, or maybe then the next one there's a Golden Boy card, Matchroom card, Queensberry. So this is actually a really good deal, folks. We should really hope that it goes out fairly well, because even though, yeah, you could also have it streaming on the zone, it's never a bad thing when you can have boxing on, even if it's regular cable, on regular cable.
Exactly. Now the other part is, getting the right fights and getting a number of fights, and hopefully getting these fighters to fight more often, because I don't understand how these boxers only fighting two times a year. They should fighting 3-4 times a year at least, but that's another argument for another day. Let's move on to talk about some fights happening, as Gail mentioned, and she had to have a hard out. So I want to thank Gail for being on the show this week. If you want to talk boxing with her, you can do so. You can check out her articles, nyfights.com, and you can check her out both on Twitter and on YouTube. Gail Falkenthal on boxing. And repeat that again, Gail Falkenthal on boxing. Only one fight really to focus on, Daniel, this week, and that is up tomorrow, as a matter of fact. In Russia, Murat Gassiev, Peter Kadiru, for a regular WBA regular heavyweight title. Okay, Gassiev, his best work was at cruiserweight. His prime was at cruiserweight. Kadiru, I've seen him on film. He could give him a decent fight. The problem is with the opponent, Kadiru, is that he hasn't faced any world-class opposition. That alone, I tend to give Gassiev a bit of an edge. Now, in truth, am I really excited about this fight? No. But it's here. We have to cover it. So, your thoughts? Because outside of that, I ain't got much. I'm sorry.
Well, this isn't, I believe, for the regular WBA shot, since Usyk vacated all the belts.
Yeah, right. Since this is for the full, you're right. You're right.
This is going to be for the full WBA version of the heavyweight title. Now, that's about Gassiev. I agree. His best work was always at cruiserweight, but he also knew, like Usyk did, that the money, like once the cruiserweight tournament, the World Boxing Super Series, once that was done, and knowing that they didn't have a lot of other cruiserweights waiting in the wings, heavyweight was the picture in that area. This should be a good cakewalk for Gassiev, because I forgot he was supposed to face somebody else, but I think they pulled out due to injury, and that gives him a prime opportunity to gain a heavyweight title. And now we're starting to see how the landscape is going to shape up.
And I know Juggerhead, Joe Joyce was trying to get in this opportunity to fight him, but he's fighting on the undercard. My bad, Daniel, continue.
Yeah. And Joe Joyce has been one of those fighters that's been in the periphery. But that's one area that we have to look at. We're going to slowly start seeing how the chess pieces are going to be moving post Usyk. Like, even though we know he's still around, and even though we know he's probably only going to take cash money fights, or like I said, he's also one of the ones that has been in the crosshairs of Zuffa. So with Gassiev, hey, he's probably going to win title. He will be able to call himself a heavyweight champion. We have to see how long that lasts, though, because he's on the outside of the periphery when it comes to when you think of contenders for the heavyweight division. And when you still have Moses, you still have Philip Hergovich, you still have Andy Ruiz, you have Frank Sanchez, you still technically have Richard Torres. Like, there's a slew of other fighters that you could picture that are ahead of Gassiev. Right? Smart management, and we know how the WBA rolls. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, and I think we're going to end things on that note. As I said just a few minutes ago, Gail had to step out early. I'll put it back up here again. Um, if you want to talk boxing with her, you can check out her work over at nyflights.com. You can check her out on all other social media platforms. Gail Falkenthal on boxing, including her YouTube channel where she interviews a lot of boxing dignitaries, trainers, fighters, writers, etc. I'll go to you, Daniel, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to Miami Heat. And interesting news that broke just a few hours ago as Bam Adebayo got into a fight during the Summer League's NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. I'm sure you got tabs on that. Him and Tyler Hero. But for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, let the folks know where they can find you.
You see it on the social there, folks. Ruckus99, RAWKUC99. Names on Twitter. Fuck you, Elon. Never calling an X. They said Blue Sky, Threads, IG, pretty much any spot that there is social media. Try to make sure to grab it on there. And mainly thing I'm gonna say is this: okay, we getting a little bit of summer lull. Obviously, probably people are recovering for the 4th, but we're gonna see a lot of politics pick up. And now that we know that most of the traditional powers are under one broadcast umbrella, it's probably a little bit easier than to see how the fights are gonna be scheduled in and out.
Indeed, for those who want to talk boxing, music, and fitness, and smell good with me, you know what it is on Twitter, because I like Daniel. I refuse to call it X. Brother JR at Brother JR76. You can also check me out on Blue Sky and IG, Brother JRSC. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Gassiev and Kadiru. We may talk Joe Joyce, who, as I mentioned, is going to fight on the undercard. We'll also preview some fights that's going to happen on the 18th. The return of Diego Pacheco, who fights on the 18th in Carson, California. He's going to be fighting Emanuel Alim on the undercard. Andy Cruz going to fight Abraham Montoya. Albert Puello also fights on that date. And also a card on the 20th. We may talk about that in Japan, a triple header in Japan. Shokichi Awata, going to defend his really good fighter at 108 pounds. People are sleeping on him, don't know enough about him. He's going to defend WBC 108-pound title against a fighter by the name of Kenshiro Suraji, who's a future Hall of Famer in my estimation. He's moving up to 115, fighting Israel Gonzalez for the vacant WBO belt. That belt was recently vacated by Bam Rodriguez, who, as we all know now, is moving up to 100. Has moved up to 100 from 115 to 118 pounds. So we will talk about those fights. Indeed, I want to thank everybody who's checking us out live on YouTube, who's checking us out on YouTube. Thank you, Compliance, for stopping by again. For Gail of nyfights.com and Gail Falkenthal on boxing. For Daniel for Boxing News Indian Subscriber, I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 492 of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Special live Friday night episode. I hope to return to either our Monday or Wednesday format next week, but due to scheduling conflicts, we had to do it this episode on a Friday night. Episode 492, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. For Gail, for Daniel, I am Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.